I was 78 the night everything snapped into place. Late October in Spokane, cold enough that the wind coming off the river felt like it was slicing through my flannel shirt. You'd probably think a man my age ought to be asleep by 9 p.m., maybe watching reruns of MASH on the old box TV in my den. But that night, sleep wasn't even a possibility. Because earlier that afternoon at exactly 3:42 p.m., I found out my grandson, my own blood, had spent 3 months siphoning off $90,000 from the savings account I'd built over a lifetime of busted knuckles and swing shifts. 90,000. That number kept flashing across my mind like a broken neon sign. It wasn't the money itself, not really. I'd worked 34 years at the Kaiser aluminum plant, long enough that the smell of hot metal still sits in my nose some nights. I wasn't rich, but I'd done all right. No, what gutted me was the betrayal. The way he smiled at me 2 days before, that easy grin he used to flash when he was 6 and I taught him how to cast a fishing line into Clear Lake. That same grin, while he emptied me out. When the bank manager, a young guy named Daniel with a haircut too sharp for his age, sat me down and slid the stack of printed statements toward me, I thought he'd made some kind of mistake. "Sir," he said gently, "these transfers were authorized online. Same device, same login." I remember gripping the edge of the desk. "That can't be," I told him. "I don't do online banking. Hell, I barely do email." Daniel nodded like he already knew. "That's what concerns us." My throat tightened. I felt stupid, slow, like maybe I had clicked something wrong months ago without realizing. When you're pushing 80, people already expect you to be a little confused. And sometimes, I'll admit, I play into it just so folks underestimate me. "Look at the recipient account," Daniel finally said. I did, and the blood drained right down into my socks. Jay Collins. My grandson, Jacob Collins, 28 years old, recently unemployed, always had excuses. I don't remember walking back to my truck. I just remember the cold, the kind that makes your joints hurt, the kind that makes your chest hollow out. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee going cold in front of me. The clock above the fridge ticked loud enough to feel like it was smacking me. You'd think after all these years, losing my wife, losing friends, losing my health in pieces, I'd be numb to pain. But no, this one hurt in a place I didn't even know existed. Around 7 p.m., Jacob called me, like clockwork, like he always did when he wanted something. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, had that fake sweetness in his voice. "You doing okay tonight?" I almost dropped the phone. "You tell me," I said. A pause, barely a second, but when you know someone since the day they were born, you hear everything. What do you mean?" I said, "I went to the bank today." Another pause, longer. I pictured him in his apartment, pacing, running his hand through that messy dark hair of his. "Grandpa," he finally said, "before you get upset." "I'm already upset." He sighed. "Look, I just borrowed the money. I'm gonna pay it back. You should have seen the investment opportunity." "You stole from me," I said quietly. 3 months, $90,000, my entire emergency fund." "Grandpa, calm down," he snapped. "You're overreacting." That did it, that word, overreacting. It's what people say when they've been lying a long time. "Come by tomorrow," I told him. "We'll talk in person." He hesitated. "Why can't we just—" "In person," I repeated. "I'm an old man, Jacob, respect that." He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there another hour, maybe more, just listening to the house creak in the wind. The kind of quiet you only get when everything in your life is changing, and you can feel the crack forming before the break. And that's when something shifted in me. You know how at my age people assume you're slow, that you can't connect dots, that you're half asleep at the wheel. Well, they're wrong. Because that night, sitting at my kitchen table with the lights low and the world silent around me, I saw everything clearly for the first time. He spent 3 months stealing $90,000 from me. I would spend one night taking everything back. And that night started right then. At 9:14 p.m., when I grabbed my keys, walked out into the cold, climbed into my old F-150, and set out to do the thing no grandfather ever wants to do. Before everything fell apart, before bank statements and cold October nights and the kind of betrayal that cracks a man down the center, my life was simple. Not perfect, not glamorous, not the sort of thing folks write about. Just steady. Predictable in the way a good, worn-in pair of boots feels predictable. I liked it that way. Back then my mornings started the same as they had for years. Black coffee, 2 slices of wheat toast, and the sound of the 6 a.m. weather report on KXLY out of Spokane. That old radio, scratchy as it was, gave me company in the quiet house. My wife Carol used to say she liked to fall asleep to its hum. After she passed in 2015, lung cancer, fast and cruel, I kept listening to it out of habit. Sometimes I still caught myself turning my head to share a comment with her. Funny how the mind works. Most days I'd head out to the garage around 7. Not to do anything important, just enough tinkering to justify getting out of the house. Oil changes for neighbors, replacing brake pads, fixing loose wiring. My hands aren't what they used to be, but they're still steadier than some guys half my age. The younger ones from down the block would wander over sometimes, watching me work. "You should start charging people, Mr. Collins," one of them once said. I told him, "Son, if I wanted to work for money at my age, I would have never retired." He laughed I didn't. See, I'd worked 34 years at Kaiser Aluminum over in Meade, graveyard shifts mostly. The whistle, the burn of hot metal in the air, the hum of machinery so loud it vibrated in your ribs. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And it paid for a mortgage, 2 kids, and a little cabin by Priest Lake that I still miss more than I should admit. I put away what I could, 50 here, 100 there. I didn't touch a penny unless I had to. That's where the $90,000 came from. Not luck, not handouts, just time, sweat, and grit. And Jacob, well, he used to know that. He was different before. Sweet kid. Quiet, thoughtful. When he was 10, he'd spend weekends over at my place while his parents were sorting through one of their many temporary separations. He'd sit at my kitchen table, legs swinging under the chair, and help me work on jigsaw puzzles. "Grandpa," he asked once, "why do you like puzzles so much?" "Because," I told him, "you start with a mess and little by little you make sense of it." He nodded in that serious way kids sometimes do, like he was storing it in his bones. We used to fish Clear Lake every summer. I taught him how to clean trout, gutting them with a pocket knife he wasn't supposed to have yet. When he caught his first big one, maybe 8 inches, though he swore it was 12, I took him to Denny's to celebrate. The waitress brought him a chocolate milkshake that was bigger than his head. "You're a good kid," I told him that day. "Grandpa," he said, looking up at me with those big brown eyes, "you're my favorite person." God help me, I believed him. I should tell you, his parents didn't do him any favors. My daughter, Sarah, loved that boy, but she had a soft spot for chaos. And his father, Mark. Let's just say the man liked big plans and small follow-through. They moved houses every year, changed jobs every other, always chasing something better that somehow never appeared. So Jacob spent a lot of time with me. Maybe that's why what he did cut deeper than anything else in my long life. But things changed when he hit his 20s. He drifted, worked a year at a car wash, quit, tried community college, dropped out, got into some online trading nonsense. Always a new scheme, always one big break away from making it. He'd stop by to borrow $20 here, 50 there. "You'll get it back," he'd say. I didn't loan him the money because I believed he'd pay it back. I did it because I remembered that 10-year-old boy eating a milkshake bigger than his dreams. But then earlier this year, late June, he started coming around more often, helping me with groceries, mowing the lawn, asking about computer stuff I didn't understand. "You should get online banking," he said one afternoon while fixing my old desktop. "It's safer, automatic, you don't have to go down to the branch anymore." "I like the branch," I told him. "I like talking to humans." He laughed. "You're old school, Grandpa, let me help you, okay?" I should have seen the warning signs in that. The way he insisted. The way he said, "Let me help," like he was doing me a favor. But you don't look at your grandson and see a threat. You see memories. You see hope. You see the future you won't live long enough to witness. If only I'd known he was already planning it. If only I'd known he'd memorized my passwords. If only I'd known that while we sat at my kitchen table drinking lemonade on a hot July afternoon, he'd already made his first unauthorized transfer. Looking back, it chills me because he didn't rush it. He took 3 careful months, a few thousand here, a few thousand there, quiet, patient, like a fox testing the fence line for weak spots. That boy I once took fishing learned how to gut something much bigger. And me, I was too busy being proud of him to see the knife coming. But here's the thing, and you need to understand this before we go any further. I wasn't the helpless old man he thought I was. Not by a long shot. Because the moment I discovered what he'd done, everything from my past, the factory grit, the instincts, the stubbornness, rose back up in me, and I realized this wasn't going to be a story about loss. It was going to be a story about a man who'd already lost enough in life and wasn't going to lose one more damn thing without a fight. And that fight, well, it started sooner than Jacob ever expected. You'd think the first crack, the moment the illusion breaks, would come with something obvious, a missing check, a phone call, a letter in the mail, but no, life doesn't work like that. Betrayal rarely announces itself. It tiptoes, it whispers, it taps on the window first. For me, the first crack came on a hot afternoon in early August, the kind where Spokane feels like it's trying to become Arizona. I remember sitting on my porch, pretending to read the sports section, sweat rolling down my spine, when Jacob pulled up in that beat-up Honda of his. The engine rattled like someone had shaken bolts inside a coffee can. He climbed out waving. "Grandpa, you outside? Good, I need to talk to you." Right away I felt it in my gut. That tone, too upbeat, too rehearsed. "What's going on?" I asked. He plopped himself down on the porch step like he used to when he was 14. But he wasn't 14 anymore. 28, and already carrying that worn-out look people get when they've made too many bad choices in too few years. "So, he began, digging his heel into the dusty boards. "I've got a chance to get into this investment group. It's legit. A friend of mine from the gym made 40 grand in 2 months. I put my paper down. "Jacob, you know I don't do investments." He shook his head fast. No, I'm not asking you to invest. Just, I need to stabilize some things." He took a breath and flashed that same grin he'd used on me 100 times. "Could you loan me a little, just until next month?" "How much?" I asked carefully. 500, maybe 1,000. I looked at him, really looked. His eyes darted, his leg bounced. When someone wants money, you can always smell it before they say the number. I'd smelled it in friends, coworkers, even my own brother once. But this was my grandson, the kid who used to fall asleep on my recliner watching Mariners games. Still, something felt off. "Why don't you get a job instead?" I said. He stiffened. "I told you I'm working on something bigger." That's what people say right before they ask for free money. His jaw tightened. "Grandpa, it's just a loan." That was the moment, the very first moment, when something flickered in his expression. A tiny break in the mask, a flash of entitlement. That's the only word for it. Like the money I had was somehow community property and he was part of the community. I didn't give him the loan, told him I couldn't spare it. A lie, but a necessary one. He drove off annoyed, tires spitting gravel. And for the first time, I sat there on my porch and wondered if the boy I raised in my kitchen all those summers had grown into something I didn't recognize. But I didn't know the half of it yet. The second crack came a few weeks later on a Wednesday morning. I'd gone down to the grocery store, Rosswor's on 29th, for bread, eggs, and something sweet I didn't need. When I checked out, my debit card got declined. Now, I've had embarrassing moments in life. Once slipped on ice in front of the whole VFW hall. Once knocked a bowling ball off the rack and nearly broke my toe. But nothing stings quite like a cashier looking at you with that soft little smile meant for children and the elderly. "Do you want to try again, sir?" she asked. I did decline again. I left the cart, walked to my truck with my cheeks burning, and sat there with the engine running and my heart thudding like it used to before a fight in high school. I checked my balance right there in the parking lot, hands shaking just a little. It showed less than it should have. Not a ton, just a couple thousand missing, but enough for me to freeze. I told myself maybe my check hadn't cleared. Maybe I paid a bill and forgot. But deep down, something cold crept in. When I got home, Jacob was already sitting at my table. I stopped in the doorway. "How'd you get in?" "You gave me the spare key, remember?" He smiled, but his eyes didn't. "I came to check your computer. Your bank sent an email about unusual activity." My stomach dropped so fast I felt lightheaded. "What activity?" I said. "I don't know yet," he said quickly. "Probably nothing. You know how these things go." He was typing fast on my old keyboard, screens flashing, his brow furrowed in exaggerated concern. I stood behind him, watching, and the longer I watched, the more I noticed he wasn't looking at the screen like a man investigating something. He was steering, redirecting. "Looks fine," he finally said, closing windows a little too fast. "Just a glitch, probably the bank doing a systems update. Happens all the time." He said it so smoothly I almost bought it, almost. But when he left 20 minutes later, I sat down at the computer myself, tried to pull up my bank, got locked out, too many password attempts. My heart hammered, because I sure as hell hadn't tried logging in. When I called the bank the next day, they told me someone had changed my security questions. They reset everything, apologized, assured me it was likely an error. But I knew. I didn't want to know, but I did. That was the moment, the true, undeniable crack, when confusion turned into suspicion. But suspicion is a funny thing. At my age, everyone tells you not to trust your instincts. They say you misremember things. They tell you not to worry. They talk to you like you're fragile. Jacob counted on that. The shattering came in late September. It was a Sunday evening, the air crisp, the sky fading orange over the pines. I was sorting mail at the kitchen counter when a letter slipped out from the stack. Thin envelope, bank logo in the corner. I almost tossed it aside. Most of their stuff is junk these days, until I saw the words. Transfer confirmation. My hands went cold. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet with a list of transfers I never made. Thousands upon thousands gone. The earliest one dated back to July, the latest just 3 days before. And at the bottom, recipient J. Collins. Not even disguised, not even clever, just his initial and last name bold as brass. I called the number on the paper, spoke to Daniel, the same manager who'd helped me later when I finally saw the full picture. He listened quietly as I explained, then said softly, "Sir, these transfers were done from your device. Same IP, same login." And that's when the world tilted. Because I knew, without a doubt, who had used my device. When the call ended, I didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't throw anything. I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the paper, the house settling around me like it always does around 7 p.m. A slow, steady creak, a sigh, as if the place itself felt the betrayal. Around 9, my landline rang. "Jacob." "Hey, Grandpa," he said, "just checking in." And I swear to you, I could hear the money in his voice, hear the confidence, the assumption that I'd never figure out what he'd done. "Jacob," I said, my voice low, steady, colder than winter on 5 Mile Prairie. "I know." Silence. Then a laugh, nervous, forced. "Know what?" "The money." Another silence, longer, heavy. He finally exhaled. "Grandpa, whatever you think you saw. You stole from me." I felt my throat tighten. "My own flesh and blood." He snapped. "I didn't steal anything, I borrowed it. You don't even use half of what you've got, you don't need." "Need?" I whispered. 40 years I worked, 40 years, and you think I don't need what I earned?" "This isn't a big deal," he said, voice rising. "You're blowing this out of proportion." And that, right there, was the final crack. The moment I stopped seeing him as a kid who made bad choices and started seeing him as a man who believed he deserved my life's work. When he hung up on me, the house went silent again. The kind of silent where even memories are afraid to move. That was the night I made a decision. I wasn't going to let the world turn me into another helpless old man. I wasn't going to let Jacob walk away with what I built. and I damn sure wasn't going to let him treat me like I was already dead. What came after? Well, that was the beginning of the war he never saw coming. You ever have a moment where time doesn't just slow down, it stops? Where the world goes quiet, like someone pressed a thumb against the pulse of your life. That was me on October 12, 2023, at exactly 3:42 p.m., sitting in a small office at Columbia Federal Bank while the fluorescent lights hummed overhead and the smell of burnt coffee drifted in from the lobby. I'd gone in expecting clarity, maybe closure, maybe even the faint hope that this was all a misunderstanding. It was. The shattering moment of my life came in the form of 23 printed pages that Daniel, the same young manager who'd helped me before, placed gently on the desk in front of me like they were medical test results. "Take your time," he said quietly. But I didn't need time. Because the second my eyes hit the first page, I felt something inside me crack clean in half. $4,200 transfer, July 3. $3,875 transfer, July 14. $6,050 transfer, August 1. $2,600 transfer, August 10. $7,900 transfer, August 25. It just kept going. And going. And going. Page after page of withdrawals, transfers, micro-movements he'd made to avoid the bank's fraud triggers, each one small enough to stay non-suspicious, each one slow, deliberate, calculated. Total, $90,412.18. $90,000. Taken in slices, like carving off strips of a man's dignity. My throat clicked when I tried to swallow. Daniel shifted in his chair. "Mr. Collins, I don't know how to say this gently. These transfers all came from your home IP address. Same password, same security questions." "My security questions were changed," I said. "I told you that." He nodded. "Yes, and someone with access to your email confirmed the changes." That hit me so hard my hand shook on the table. He tried not to look at it, but he did. I saw the softening in his eyes, the way young people look at the elderly when they smell vulnerability. But I wasn't vulnerable. I was angry. "Who had access?" he asked. I stared straight at him. My voice came out like gravel sliding down concrete. "My grandson." He didn't say anything, didn't need to. The silence did the talking for him. That's when he showed me the security footage I hadn't asked for but desperately needed. There it was, the login history from my account. Timestamps lining up perfectly with the evenings Jacob had stopped by to help with the computer. Nights he sat at my kitchen table, sipping my lemonade, telling me he was helping me keep up with the times. And then, like a knife slipping between ribs, the footage from the ATM outside the North Division branch. The screen flashed. The card went in. And then, Jacob. Plain as day. My debit card in his right hand. My PIN punched in with his left. My heart didn't break. It detonated. I felt it like a dull explosion behind my ribs, sending something dark crawling through my veins. Daniel paused the frame. "I'm sorry, Mr. Collins." I stared at the photo, at the curve of Jacob's jaw, at the stupid tattoo he'd gotten on his forearm, at the carelessness, at the total absence of guilt. "You okay?" Daniel asked. I was. But I nodded anyway. He slid a fraud report toward me. "If you want to press charges, we can proceed." But I didn't touch the paper, didn't even look at it. Because something else, something older, deeper, forged from decades of factory grit and disappointment, was stirring in me. A feeling I hadn't had since the early '80s when I once confronted a foreman who tried to cheat a few of us out of overtime. Back then, I walked into his office with a logbook, 3 witnesses and a union rep, and walked out with a check and an apology. The same feeling was rising now. Except this was worse. This was family. And the law. The law takes months, maybe years. And the law has sympathy for troubled young men who make poor financial choices. But me. I had no sympathy left. Not a teaspoon. As I sat there, gripping the edge of that desk so tight my knuckles whitened, I realized something with sudden, knife-sharp clarity. I wasn't going to let the state of Washington decide how this ended. This wasn't a matter for courts or cops. This was personal. This was blood. This was the boy I raised turning into the man who gutted me. I signed nothing. Not that day. Instead, I folded the packet slowly, slid it into my jacket, and stood. "Thank you," I told Daniel. My voice was calm, too calm. "Do you want us to freeze the account?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not yet." He stared at me, unsure, hesitating. "Sir, with respect, that's dangerous." I looked him dead in the eye. "Son, I know exactly how dangerous it is. Because freezing it would have tipped Jacob off. And I needed him unaware. I needed him confident. I needed him to think the old man was clueless." When I stepped out of the bank, the sun hit me square in the face, warm and blinding. And right then, at that exact moment, I felt the shift. Not fear. Not sorrow. Not even shame. Purpose. Pure, sharp, cold purpose. On the drive home, my hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. My breathing stayed steady as the old Ford rumbled across the Maple Street Bridge. I drove like a man who had already made peace with what he knew he had to do. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had gone gray and the wind was picking up. I sat there a moment, engine running, the papers heavy in my jacket. Then I said it out loud, to no one, just to hear it in the air. "He took 3 months to steal from me." My hand closed around the steering wheel. "And I'm going to take one night to end him. And God help me." I meant every word. You think the worst part of betrayal is the moment you discover it, the bank statements, the footage, the lies finally unraveling in your hands. But that's not true. The real descent happens after, in the days that follow, when the world keeps turning like nothing happened, and you're left trying to breathe through the weight sitting on your chest. The week after I walked out of that bank felt like someone had drained the color out of my life. Spokane in late October is already gray, but this was different. The house felt colder. The air tasted metallic. Even the sound of my own boots on the linoleum seemed hollow. I stopped opening the curtains. I stopped shaving. Some mornings, I'd wake up in the recliner with the TV talking to itself at 3 a.m. I'd stare at the ceiling and feel every one of my 78 years stacked on top of me like bags of concrete. People talk about heartbreak like it's poetic. It's not. Heartbreak is practical. It affects your routine, your breathing, your appetite. It's a thief long before revenge ever enters the picture. 3 days after the bank visit, Sarah, my daughter Jacob's mother, called me. "Dad," she said, "you sound off. Everything okay?" I cleared my throat. "Fine, just tired." "You don't sound fine. Do you want me to come over?" "No," it came out too sharp. I softened my voice. "I'm all right, really." I couldn't tell her. Not yet. I didn't want her making excuses for him. I didn't want her crying. And mostly, I didn't want her feeling guilty for raising a boy who could do something like this. When we hung up, I sat at the table staring at my old Timex watch. I'd bought it the year Jacob was born. Funny what sticks in your mind when everything else feels unsteady. The real breaking point came on a Thursday evening. I'd just finished heating up a can of chicken noodle soup, the cheap kind, mostly salt and memory, when my landline rang. I almost didn't answer, but I saw the caller ID, Jacob C. I froze. Then I picked it up. His voice was casual, too casual. "Hey, Grandpa, everything good?" "Fine," I said. My voice surprised me, flat, almost empty. "I was thinking," he continued, "we should grab dinner soon. Maybe that diner near your place, the one with the good pie." The same diner where he'd eaten half my fries every time he was 12. I swallowed, "Sure." "Great," he said, cheerful again. "Hey, by the way, did the bank ever fix that glitch you mentioned?" The world went still. He was checking, testing, fishing for whether I knew. "Yes," I said, "they fixed it." He hesitated half a second, barely noticeable, but I heard it. "Good, good. I worried you'd get stressed over nothing." Over nothing. The gall of it. He might as well have driven a nail through my hand. After he hung up, I sat there for a long time, soup untouched, radio humming softly in the background. The words over nothing bounced around my skull like loose bullets. And that was when the real descent began. I felt it like a slow slide down a muddy embankment, nothing to grab onto. Every memory of him, good and bad, replayed in jagged flashes. Him running across the yard with a kite. Him crying after scraping his knee. Him calling me from community college the day he dropped out. Him asking for money again and again. Him holding my debit card at that ATM. A grandson should be a comfort in your old age. Mine was a storm with pockets full of stolen lightning. The next morning I drove myself to the doctor. My blood pressure had skyrocketed. The nurse, a kind woman named Betty, touched my wrist lightly. "You're under stress," she said. I laughed, quiet, humorless. "You could say that." "You living alone?" "Yes." "Got people who check on you?" I almost answered yes. Then I stopped, because the one person who should have been checking on me was the reason my blood pressure was climbing like a faulty thermometer. "Not really," I said. She frowned but didn't push. The doctor wanted to adjust my medication, told me stress at my age can trigger heart events. I nodded, but inside I felt a heavy truth settling in. If I didn't get control of this situation, it wasn't just my savings I'd lose. It was my health, maybe my life. Driving home, the world looked different, sharper around the edges. The grocery store parking lot felt too big, the intersections too loud. Even my own driveway felt unfamiliar, like I was visiting someone else's home. I walked inside, dropped my keys on the counter, and stood there gripping the edge of the sink until my knuckles ached. The refrigerator hummed. The heater clicked. The house felt like a stranger. "This can't be my life," I muttered into the empty kitchen. But it was, and the weight of that truth pushed me into the darkest corner I'd been in since my wife died. For the next 2 days, I barely spoke. I barely ate. I found myself standing in the hallway once without remembering why I'd gone there. That scared me more than the money. But something else happened during those 2 quiet, crushing days. The grief turned into something harder, heavier, more focused. Not rage. Rage burns too hot and too fast. This was something else, something steadier. A cold resolve. Because once the descent bottoms out, there's only one direction left to go. Up. And up meant fighting. On the 3rd night, around 11 p.m., I sat in the dark living room with the TV off and the streetlight pouring through the blinds. I looked at the fraud packet again. Then I whispered something I hadn't said aloud in years. "No more." And just like that, the descent ended. The climb began. The next step was gathering allies. But allies don't appear on their own. And mine, well, she arrived the very next morning, wearing scrubs and a concerned frown. The morning my ally arrived, I wasn't expecting anyone. I'd barely slept, just drifted in and out of a foggy, half-conscious state where the only thing I could see behind my eyelids was Jacob at that ATM, punching in my PIN with the same fingers that used to tug at my sleeve asking for ice cream. Around 8:15 a.m., there was a knock at my door. Firm, not tentative. The kind of knock people use when they're not afraid of what's on the other side. I shuffled over, joints stiff, breath tight, and pulled the door open. There she stood, Rosa Alvarez, my next-door neighbor's daughter. 34, maybe 35. A night shift nurse at Sacred Heart Hospital. Scrubs still on, hair tied back, dark circles under her eyes from another 12-hour shift. She'd always been kind to me, helping bring my trash bins down on icy days, checking in when my porch light didn't come on one winter night. But that morning, she looked at me like she already knew something was wrong. "Mr. Collins," she said, "you look pale. Can I come in?" I hesitated. I hadn't let anyone into my home since the bank, but something in her voice, steady, practical, cut through the fog. "Yeah," I muttered, "come on." She walked inside, eyes scanning the place, taking everything in the way nurses do, quiet, observant, noticing details most people miss. She set her bag down. "You didn't answer your phone last night," she said. "Your daughter asked me to check on you." She paused. "She said you sounded off." I let out a breath. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." Her tone wasn't sharp, just factual. "Sit down for me, please." I sat in my recliner like a tired old dog being inspected by a vet. She took my wrist, checked my pulse, then pressed 2 fingers to my neck. "Your heart rate's too high," she said softly. "Something has got you tied up in knots." For a minute, I didn't say anything. I just stared at the muted TV, watching people I didn't know walk across a park from a commercial I wasn't listening to. Then she said, "Mr. Collins, what happened?" And I cracked. Not fully, not in some dramatic Hollywood way, but enough for the truth to spill out in pieces. "The bank," I whispered, "he took from me." "Who?" "My grandson," I swallowed hard. 90,000. Rosa didn't gasp, didn't rush, didn't pepper me with questions like others might have. She just set her hand on my forearm and said, "I'm here. Tell me what you need me to understand." So I told her. The transfers. The ATM video. The phone calls. The way my body had started falling apart under the stress. She listened like she was absorbing every word into her bones. When I finished, she leaned back in the chair across from me, thinking. "Okay," she said finally, "we're going to fix this." I blinked. "Who's we?" She pointed to herself. "Me and whoever else you trust." "I don't trust anyone," I muttered. "Well," she said with a small smile, "you trust me enough to tell me the truth." That landed harder than I expected. "But listen," she continued, "if you want any chance of getting your life back, your money, your peace, you can't do this alone, and you can't go in blind." "I'm not blind," I snapped reflexively. Her expression didn't change. She wasn't attacking, she was steadying me. "You're not blind," she said quietly, "but you're hurting, and he's counting on that." My jaw tightened. Yeah, Jacob was counting on me being confused, overwhelmed, ashamed, counting on me to crumble before the weight of it. Rosa leaned forward. "Your grandson planned this. He took his time, 3 months, right?" "Yes." "Then we'll take ours, but smarter." I shook my head. "I don't have months." She studied me for a moment. "What exactly do you want, Mr. Collins?" The question hit me like cold air to the lungs. What did I want? Not just the money. That mattered, sure, but not the way people think. It was the principle, the betrayal, the humiliation of having your own blood treat you like you were nothing but an old wallet with a heartbeat. "I want him to face what he did," I said, voice cracking just slightly. "I want him to understand he didn't steal from a fool." Rosa nodded slowly. "Then the first thing we need is evidence." "I already have evidence," I said, tapping the fraud packet. She shook her head. "No, you have bank evidence. You don't have personal evidence, his messages, his access to your device, his excuses, his reactions." I frowned. "Why do I need that?" "Because," she said, "the legal system cares about intent. And if he tries to flip this, say you gave him permission, say you forgot, say you're confused, the court might listen." My stomach twisted. Because she was right. Jacob could spin this 100 different ways. And courts, they treat old men gently but not always fairly. "What do you suggest?" I asked. She pulled a small digital recorder from her bag. Slim, black, quiet. "You're going to talk to him," she said. "Soon. And you're going to let him talk, let him bury himself with his own words." I swallowed. "I don't know if I can." "Yes," she said, her voice steady but gentle. "You can. You're stronger than he thinks." Her confidence startled me. It chipped away at something in my chest, something heavy and self-defeating. "He's coming for dinner tomorrow," I said. She nodded. "Good, we'll prepare." And right then something inside me shifted. The fog lifted an inch. I felt my breathing clear, my shoulders straighten, my pulse slow just enough to stop rattling. Maybe it was the nurse in her. Maybe it was her calm. Or maybe it was the simple act of not being alone in this anymore. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something that had been missing since July. Control. She stood to leave. I'll be back tonight, we'll set everything up. I walked her to the door, and just before she stepped outside, she turned. And Mr. Collins? Yes. What your grandson did doesn't make you weak. It makes him rotten. Don't mix those up. When she left, I stood there in the doorway long after her taillights disappeared, feeling the October wind cut across my face. I wasn't falling anymore. I was rising. Slowly, steadily. Like a man with purpose. And the trap we were about to build. It would be the first move in ending the 3-month crime he thought he'd gotten away with. By the time Rosa returned that night, the house felt different. Not warmer, nothing could warm that house, not after what had happened, but steadier. Like the walls themselves were bracing for what came next. I'd spent the afternoon pacing, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, rechecking the clock every 10 minutes. At 78, waiting feels heavier than action. It crawls into your joints. Rosa knocked twice. Same firm, no-nonsense rhythm as before. She stepped inside carrying a tote bag filled with equipment that made my stomach tighten. Digital recorder, a cheap smartphone, a small external hard drive, cables I couldn't name. She dropped the bag on my kitchen table like she was preparing for battlefield surgery. Let's get started, she said. I sat across from her while she laid everything out. The kitchen light flickered above us, humming just slightly, the way it always had, ever since Carol used to say we needed to replace it. I'd never gotten around to it. Rosa held up the recorder first. This is your safety net. You'll keep it in your shirt pocket. I tested it. It picks up conversations even if the room is noisy. I'm not sure he'll say anything, I muttered. Oh, he will, she said gently but firmly. People who steal don't like loose ends. He'll try to reassure you, manipulate you, maybe even justify what he did. And all of that is useful. The way she said useful made the hair on my arm stand up. She pulled out the second device, a cheap prepaid smartphone. This is for video if we need it. We won't push that the first night. Let him talk freely. Let him think he's still in control. He thinks that already, I said. Good, she replied. Keep it that way. She plugged the phone into my laptop and started configuring something. Passwords, backup settings. I watched her hands move, calm, precise, practiced. She must have noticed my stare. You're doing the right thing, she said. I don't feel like it. No one does, she said softly. But you're reclaiming your footing, that matters. When she finished, she picked up the fraud packet I'd shown her earlier. She placed it between us. This is what he did, she said, tapping the pages. She tapped her other hand to her chest. But this, your resolve, this is what he didn't expect. Something in me tightened. Not anger, something clearer, like the world had clicked into focus. We went through the plan again. When he arrives tomorrow, she said, you're going to act normal, a little confused maybe, tired, vulnerable but not enough to scare him away. Let him think you still see him as the good grandson. That'll be hard, I admitted. It's a performance, she said. But you survived 30 years in a factory dealing with supervisors who tried to cheat you out of overtime. You can handle one dinner. That made me smile, first real smile in weeks. What do I say? I asked. Nothing direct, don't accuse him, let him fill the silence. People who lie can't stand silence. He'll talk, he'll circle back, he'll dig his own grave. I don't want to push him, I said. You won't have to. She stood and walked into the living room, scanning the space. Where will you sit? Where will he sit? Where does he feel most comfortable? The kitchen table, I said, always has. Good, we'll set the recorder nearby and one in your pocket. I blinked too. If one fails, you have backup. She wasn't playing around. And that made me lean in. For the next hour, we positioned things, checked microphone sensitivity, tested distances, practiced casual conversation. Every step felt surreal, like planning a sting operation in a house that used to be filled with birthday candles and grandkids' toys. When we finished, she looked at me seriously. There's something else, she said. He may get defensive, angry, he may try to guilt you. I exhaled. He's good at that. I know, she replied. So when he does, you'll stay quiet, don't interrupt, don't react, just let him reveal himself. I nodded, okay. She hesitated, then added, and Mr. Collins, if at any point tomorrow you feel overwhelmed, step away. Go to the bathroom, take a breath. He's used your emotions against you before. Don't let him do it again. When she said that, something inside me broke, not from pain but from recognition. She saw it, all of it. The shame, the confusion, the love twisted into disappointment. Thank you, I said, really. She gave a small smile. You're not alone anymore. She packed her things, except for the recorder she left on the table. Turn this on 10 minutes before he arrives. I will. She reached the door, hand on the knob, then paused. Tomorrow isn't about revenge, it's about truth. Revenge comes later. When she left, the house fell quiet again. But it wasn't the same suffocating quiet as before. It was a quiet with intention, like the air holding its breath. I walked into the kitchen, stared at the recorder, then at the empty seat Jacob always took. I ran my thumb along the edge of the table. The same table he'd done homework at. The same table where he'd eaten pancakes Carol made. The same table where he'd smiled and lied to my face as he drained my life savings. The plan wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was a start. And for the first time in months, I felt something that was almost strength. Tomorrow night, Jacob would walk into this house thinking he still owned the narrative. But what he didn't know, what he could never imagine, was that the trap was already set. The fuse was already lit. And the man he thought he'd fooled, he was done being fooled. Jacob always used to arrive late to everything, school, work, family, dinners, you name it. So when he knocked on my door exactly at 6 p.m. on the dot, I knew something was off. Punctuality for him meant intention, nerves, preparation. He wasn't coming over as a grandson. He was coming over as a man trying to control a situation. And he thought I didn't know any better. I slipped the recorder into my shirt pocket the way Rosa showed me. The small red light blinked once before disappearing beneath the fabric. In the kitchen, the second recorder sat camouflaged behind the tissue box, angled perfectly at the table. The air felt tight, electric heavy. When I opened the door, Jacob stood there wearing that same easy grin he used every time he wanted something. Clean shirt, hair combed, trying hard to look like the good grandson. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, stepping forward, arms open for a hug. I let him hug me, but loosely, not like before. "You feeling all right?" he asked. "You sounded tired last week." "Tired?" I said. "Yeah, come on in." He walked inside, sniffing the air the way he always did. Carol used to bake cinnamon rolls for him whenever he visited, and for years he'd walk in expecting to smell them. Now the house smelled like reheated stew and loneliness. "How are things?" he asked, settling into his usual chair at the kitchen table. The chair creaked, the same creak I'd heard for decades. "Oh, you know," I said, putting on that faint confusion Rosa coached me to use. "Been a lot on my mind." He tilted his head. "Yeah, like what?" I sat down across from him and let one beat of silence stretch, then another, just long enough. People like Jacob can't stand silence. They need to fill it to control it. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Grandpa, you know you can talk to me, right? Anything you're worried about, I'm here to help." I let my shoulders sag just slightly. "I've been having trouble with online stuff, the bank, passwords, all that." His face didn't move, but his eyes did, just a flicker, a tiny spark of fear hidden behind practiced calm. "Ah," he said lightly, "the bank again. I told you that was just a glitch." "Yeah," I muttered, "maybe." He smiled, relieved. "Good." Let him think I was letting it go. "So," he said, rubbing his hands together a little too cheerfully, "did you get everything straightened out?" "I don't know," I said softly. "They said some transfers happened I don't remember." He froze. A single heartbeat of stillness. Then he got up from his chair, walked around behind me and put a hand on my shoulder, gentle, almost paternal. "Grandpa," he said softly, "sometimes older people forget things, and that's okay. It's nothing to be ashamed of. My fingers curled into a fist beneath the table. I'm not forgetting, I said quietly. He squeezed my shoulder a little harder. No, it's okay. Really. I mean, banks make mistakes, people misremember things. Jacob, I said, turning my head so I could see him, did you borrow money from me? His hand froze. Just for a second. But long enough. Well, he stammered, trying to recover. I thought we talked about this. You helped me with that investment opportunity, remember? You said it was fine. I said that, I asked. Yes, he insisted. We were sitting right here. You told me to go ahead. I felt something inside me go cold. Not the shaky kind of cold, not the weak kind. A colder cold. The kind steel gets when winter air hits it. He walked back to his chair and sat down, trying to appear relaxed. Look, I was gonna tell you everything once it paid off. I didn't want you worrying. I nodded slowly. So you did take money. I didn't take it, he snapped. I borrowed it. There it was. The word Rosa told me to listen for. Borrowed. Always borrowed. Never stolen. How much? I whispered. He swallowed hard. Grandpa, this is. How much, Jacob? He exhaled like the victim. I don't know the exact number. I leaned forward. I do. His jaw tightened. You went to the bank. Yes. He didn't say a word. His eyes darted, not to me, but to the kitchen counter, to the window, to anywhere he didn't have to look at the truth. Grandpa, he said finally, you're blowing this out of proportion. You don't even spend that money. You don't need. That money kept me alive, I said, my voice steady. That money paid my medical bills. That money was your grandmother's memory. He winced. He hated when I mentioned her. She was the one person he truly respected. You're making me out to be some monster, he muttered. I'm trying to improve my life. I'm trying to do something big for once. You did something big, I said quietly. You gutted your own grandfather. He slammed his palm on the table. I said I'll pay it back. My heart jumped at the sound, loud, sharp, violent. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I lowered my voice to the softest whisper. With what money? His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I have got things in motion, he said. Deals, opportunities. You spent the money, didn't you? He stayed silent. And that silence was the closest thing to a confession I'd ever get. He sighed and slumped back. Grandpa, look, everything's going to be okay. You're all worked up over numbers. You should rest. He said it gently, like I was a child. And then he leaned forward, voice low, careful, rehearsed. Why don't you give me power of attorney, just for now? That way I can handle the confusing stuff and you can relax. My skin went cold. He wasn't just a thief. He was escalating, trying to take legal control next, trying to own the rest of my life. I stared at him, letting silence fill the room again. He shifted in his chair, uncomfortable, tapping his fingers on the table. And then right on cue, he kept talking. Look, if you just trust me, all this would be easier. I can take care of everything. You don't need to keep money sitting around you're not using. I mean, you're 70, what, 8 now? You don't need all that. Every word went into the recorder. Every excuse. Every lie. Every attempt to manipulate. Every push toward power. Rosa was right. I didn't have to force anything. He was burying himself, one sentence at a time. Jacob, I said quietly, I think it's time you left. He blinked. What? I'm tired, I said, and I need time to think. He tried to smile. Don't overthink, okay? We're family, we're fine. But I didn't smile back. I wasn't fine. And neither was he. He just didn't know it yet. When he walked out the door that evening, he thought he'd smoothed things over. He thought he'd kept me under control. He thought he'd pushed me one step closer to signing away what was left of my independence. But what he didn't realize was simple. He'd just given me everything I needed. Every word. Every lie. Every justification. Recorded. Saved. Backed up twice. The trap wasn't just set. It had snapped shut. And we were only halfway through the night. I didn't sleep the night after Jacob left, not a wink. I just sat in my recliner with the house lights off, watching the street lamps spill long yellow bars across the carpet. My heart wasn't racing anymore. My hands weren't shaking. The fear and confusion that had been eating me alive for months had settled into something quiet, something cold and solid. Resolve. I kept replaying his words in my head. You're 78, Grandpa. You don't need all that. Just give me power of attorney. Like I was an old wallet he hadn't finished emptying. When the sun finally crawled up over the pines behind my backyard, I stood up, stretched my stiff knees, and went straight to the kitchen table where Rosa and I had laid out all the evidence the night before. I pressed play on the recorder. Hearing his voice again, calm, manipulative, confident, made something tighten in my chest. Not pain, not grief, something sharper. Around 9 a.m., I called Rosa. "You ready?" she asked. "I'm ready." "Good," she said, "because today is when everything starts falling apart for him." Rosa arrived with coffee and a folder thick enough to make a lawyer proud. "This," she said, sliding it toward me, "is a summary I made for the legal aid office." "Legal aid? You need representation," she said, "and the county offers senior support resources, but we're not handing them the full story yet. Not until you decide how far you want this to go." "How far?" I repeated, though I already knew the answer. "As far as you need," she said, "but you need to see what he's risking and what you're risking if you don't act." She opened the folder and showed me. Timeline of the transfers. Login history. ATM footage timestamps. My bank statements. His own words from last night, transcribed. I read the transcript slowly, every line, every lie, every manipulation. And with each sentence, something inside me hardened. Rosa watched quietly. "How are you feeling?" I closed the folder, ready. The unraveling began at 2:13 p.m. I didn't plan the timing. Life just happened that way. I was sitting at the table, making notes like Rosa told me, dates, memories, observations, when my phone lit up with Jacob's name. I answered, voice dry, "Hello." "Hey, Grandpa," he said, sounding casual, normal, unshaken, "just making sure you're okay after dinner last night." "I'm fine." He hesitated. "Look, I've been thinking, maybe I shouldn't have brought up the power of attorney thing so fast. I know it threw you off." "It did," I said calmly. "But you have to admit," he continued, "it's a good idea for both of us." There it was again, that entitlement, that assumption that my life was already half buried and he was simply the one holding the shovel. "I've been keeping an eye on things," he went on. "Your bills, your spending. You're getting a little mixed up here and there, Grandpa, and that's okay." "I'm not mixed up," I said. He chuckled softly. "You are, you just don't see it, and that's why we need to fix this. Look, I can manage everything for you, your accounts, your retirement, everything." He thought he still had control. He thought I was still the tired old man from 2 weeks ago. He thought I was fragile. And that's when it happened. That's when the unraveling began. "Jacob," I said slowly, "I went to the police this morning." Silence. Absolute silence. Then a sharp inhale. "You what?" "I showed them the bank records," I said, "and the ATM footage." "You what?" His voice cracked. "Grandpa, why would you? This is a misunderstanding." "No," I said, "it's not." He started talking fast, too fast, words tumbling over each other like a man sprinting downhill with no brakes. "Grandpa, listen, you don't understand. If you tell them the wrong thing, if you get confused." "I recorded last night," I interrupted. Dead silence. I could practically hear his throat close. "You recorded? What do you mean? Why would you? Why, Grandpa, you can't do that. That's illegal. It has to be illegal." "It's not," I said calmly. His breathing turned ragged. "You set me up, you set me up." "No," I said quietly, "you set yourself up." He started swearing loud, frantic, unhinged before finally hanging up. I sat there, staring at the silent phone, feeling nothing but a deep, steady stillness settle inside my bones. 2 minutes later, Rosa walked in the back door. She'd told me she'd use her spare key so she wouldn't startle me. "You told him," she said. "I did. And it broke him." She nodded once. Good, he needed to crack. But the unraveling wasn't done, because by 4 p.m. chaos erupted. First, Sarah called me sobbing. "Dad, Jacob came to my house yelling, screaming, saying you're trying to ruin his life. What is going on?" I closed my eyes. "I'll explain when things settle." "He said you're lying," she cried. "He said you're confused. He said he didn't steal anything." "He stole $90,000 from me," I said softly. There was a pause, a long one. Then I heard her break. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Dad, no, no, no." I let her cry, listening to the sound of a mother realizing her son wasn't who she hoped he was. Then she said something that cut deeper than the theft itself. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry." But the true unraveling came that evening, when Jacob himself stormed into my yard, pounding on my door, shouting loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Grandpa, open the door, we need to talk." I didn't open it. I didn't move. I just turned on the porch light so the neighbors would see. He kept yelling, begging, then threatening, then crying, cycling through emotions like a man losing his grip on the only lifeline he thought he had. "You're ruining my life," he shouted. "You're ruining me." But he'd ruined himself long before I recorded a single word. Eventually, he stopped pounding, stopped shouting, stopped breathing hard. Then he said something in a small, broken voice I'll never forget. "I thought you'd never fight back." And that was when I knew. He never actually believed I was weak. He counted on me loving him too much to stop him. His unraveling wasn't about the money. It was about losing control of the one person he thought he owned. He walked away in the dark, shoulders hunched, disappearing down my driveway like a man walking into a storm. And he wasn't wrong. A storm was coming. Because the next morning, we were going to court. The courthouse in downtown Spokane isn't impressive, just a squat concrete building with too many windows and not enough warmth. But on the morning of October 19th, 2023, it felt like the center of gravity for my entire life. Every step from the parking lot to the entrance echoed through my knees, not from age, from certainty. Rosa walked beside me, steady as a metronome. She wasn't dressed in scrubs today, just jeans, a gray sweater, and a face that didn't give an inch. When we reached the security checkpoint, she touched my arm. "You okay?" "I'm standing," I said. "That's enough." Inside, the air smelled like old carpet and cold metal. People murmured, shuffling papers, checking phones. Nothing about the place suggested justice, just process. But process was enough if you came armed. And I was. At 9:17 a.m. we were called into the small hearing room. A magistrate judge, a clerk, a couple of bored public defenders drifting in and out. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just a place where truth had a chance to breathe. Jacob was already there. I hadn't seen him since he'd stood on my porch screaming. He looked smaller now, not physically, emotionally. His hair was unkempt, eyes red, hands shaking slightly as he gripped the back of a chair. When he looked at me, it wasn't anger. It was fear. "Grandpa," he whispered, voice cracking, "can we talk outside, please?" I didn't answer, I just sat. His mother, my daughter, Sarah, was beside him, wiping her eyes with the corner of a tissue. She couldn't look at me, couldn't look at him. She just stared at the floor like it held answers she wasn't ready for. The judge entered, we all stood, then sat. "This is regarding an emergency petition for financial protection and allegations of elder financial exploitation," the judge began. "Parties present." Rosa spoke first. "I'm here as Mr. Collins' support representative." Jacob cleared his throat. I'm here, I want to say." "You'll have time to speak," the judge said, her voice firm but not unkind. "First, we need to establish facts." Facts. For months I'd lived in shadows, confusion, and silence. But today Today the facts finally belonged to me. Rosa opened the folder on the table and slid forward the packet we'd been building piece by piece. Transfer logs, ATM footage stills, IP matches, login timestamps, my bank statements, written summary of events, and finally, the transcript of his own words. The judge read each page slowly, glasses low on her nose. Jacob began shifting in his chair, bouncing his knee, swallowing hard. This isn't what it looks like. I was helping him with online banking. He gets confused sometimes. My memory's fine, I said, calm, clear. He flinched. Grandpa, come on, you said I could. I never said that. The judge looked at him. Did you have permission to move this money? He tried smiling his old trick. We talked about it. He just doesn't remember. He's been stressed. His doctor told me. I didn't tell him anything, my doctor said from behind. I hadn't expected him, but Rosa had. She called him the day before. Mr. Collins is completely capable of managing his own affairs. Jacob froze. The judge turned back. Do you have any documentation to show permission? Texts, emails, signed authorizations? He shook his head. Did you tell your grandfather you took the money? Another shake. Did you return any portion of the funds? Nothing. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. Then the judge delivered the blow that finally cracked the world open. I am granting the petition. Effective immediately, Mr. Jacob Collins is barred from accessing any of Mr. Collins' accounts, devices, property, or identifying information. Furthermore, the matter will be referred to the county prosecutor for investigation of criminal elder exploitation. Jacob's face twisted like someone had struck him across the jaw. What? He shouted, half standing. You're going to ruin my life over this. We're family. The judge didn't raise her voice. Sit down, Mr. Collins, right now. He did, but tears hit the table. Not guilt, not remorse, panic. Sarah finally turned toward me, voice barely audible. Dad, why didn't you tell me sooner? I looked at her gently. Because you're his mother, I didn't want to make you choose. That broke her completely. Jacob shook his head, tears streaming. Grandpa, please, please, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted a chance to get ahead. I thought you'd forgive me. I met his eyes, those same brown eyes that once looked up at me while he held a fishing pole on Clear Lake. I can forgive you, I said quietly, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The hearing ended. Papers were signed, orders filed. The system, slow, imperfect, had done its job today, not for every elder, not for every victim, but for me. As we walked out into the hallway, Rosa touched my arm. You did it, she said. No, I replied, we did. Jacob sat on a bench in the corridor, face buried in his hands. I looked at him one last time, not as a victim, not as a broken man. As a grandfather who finally understood the hardest truth of aging. You cannot save people who refuse to save themselves. He looked up at me, eyes raw. Grandpa, is this really how it ends? I thought about his childhood, his laughter, the summers at Priest Lake, the pancakes Carol used to make him, the boy he was, the man he became. And I answered him honestly. No, this is where it begins. Because endings are tidy, clean, wrapped in bows. But what happened between us was none of those things. It would haunt both of us for years, maybe decades. He'd face charges, maybe jail, maybe probation, maybe a long road to rebuilding what he tried to burn. As for me, I walked out of that courthouse into the cold October air, breathing deeper than I had in months. The sky looked clearer, the wind felt cleaner, and the world, harsh as it is, felt a little more honest. I didn't get my $90,000 back. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I got something else. My dignity. My voice. My strength. People think revenge is about hurting someone back. It's not. It's about reclaiming what they tried to take from you. And on that morning in that gray courthouse, I reclaimed myself. That was worth more than $90,000. That was worth everything.